Greetings, Councillors. My name's Terry Lewin. I'm a long-term resident of Black Hill, and I just want to take a few minutes of your time to talk about the current Black Hill planning proposal to rezone the Catholic Diocese land in Black Hill to light industrial. Now, our community groups have engaged with Cessnock Council for over 30 years, and I have to say that this particular proposal ranks as one of the most outrageous and ill-conceived proposals. Over those years, most of the proposals that we've had to deal with are about actual fixed resources, quarries, mines, ridgelines that are threatened. And this one is entirely driven by the proponent's interest in making money. It's effectively a spot rezoning which isn't needed or wanted. Now, in reality, the Catholic Diocese bought the land for $6 million in 2003 with the intention of building a regional school and community facilities. Basically, they changed their mind. They made a mistake, pretty obviously. And really, the truth of the matter is that the local community shouldn't have to bear the brunt of that mistake from now into the future. Over the past 4 years, almost the entire focus of the planning proposal has been about the process and hiding behind really what amount to poor regional plans. Those plans were only ever meant to be overarching, as is noted in the introduction to the current regional plan. They're meant to be overarching. They're not meant to be a definitive answer. It's Council's responsibility to determine them. And over that period of time, we've had incessant bullying from the Department of Planning and from the Catholic Diocese saying there was nothing else that could be done on the site other than industrial. And really, the truth of the matter is it's entirely up to councillors to listen to the community and try and make a more balanced decision. Now, I don't want to actually dismiss the work of the council's planners because they're basically only doing their job. But if you look at the current report that's just been put out, it basically continues in that same tradition, focusing on the process. It's essentially as if council staff and councillors over the last few years made up their mind what the outcome was going to be, and all they're doing is paying lip service to the process and going through it. So if you look at page 63 of the current council report, you see a really bold statement. No new issues have been raised in this second round of public exhibition, and the fundamental opposition to the proposal remains. Well, it's true. No new issues have been identified. That's because we identified all of the conceivable issues before. So the fact that there's no new issues identified is neither here nor there. What's important is the quality of the arguments. So over the last year or so, and in July, we put in an 86-page submission. Now, yes, the material covers the same areas, but it actually provides a lot more information. It updates all the objections that we had against the draft strategic plan. It points out flaws in Council's previous arguments. It makes clear statements about what the community would like to achieve and where we would like to go. So, yes, you can say it's the same issues, but there's a lot more material in the group submission that we put in, and we hope you've had an opportunity to look at it. And if you haven't yet seen it, it's available on our website. So I just want to point out a couple of things in our detailed group submission. So for example, if you go to page 10, which deals with the issue of the need for the development, Council claimed to have done an assessment leading up to the report in 2014. Well, we give quite detailed account of what was flawed in that particular assessment, primarily the fact that they completely ignored the 183 hectares of land adjacent on the Colin Allied block. And essentially, if you take that block into account and add it to the other local supply, it's estimated that there's at least 30 to 40 years of available industrial land in the local Black Hill area. So clearly, there isn't any immediate demand, and there's an oversupply. And if you were looking seriously at it, there's more than enough locally for well beyond the time frame for the current regional plan, which is 2036. Just to highlight another section, issue 16, page 25, we go through a detailed account of what was in the draft Hunter Regional Plan and point out quite clearly that the draft Hunter Regional Plan does not provide a strategic imperative for using the Catholic Diocese land solely for industrial purposes. Just to pick another section, issue 36, page 43 of our submission, we go through a detailed argument of what the problems with the various submissions that Council had put in. A couple of versions ago, we were down to a proposal that was 150 hectares of industrial, which the council has supported going back through the process, and essentially the department rejected. But they rejected it solely because there was no strategic plan that called for a rural residential. And in fact, as we detail in our submission, we were never interested in rural residential. So the argument is plenty of other options that could have been pursued. It could have stayed at the 150 hectares of industrial, and all of the remainder of the site could have been E2 conservation. Similarly, in the group submission, in the Appendix D, there's a very detailed account of the maths involved in how we got to the 30 to 40 year claim. Appendix C, Document C, is an annotated chronology of what's happened in this development so far, with notes from the community showing the various points at which council and the local community have been bullied by the department and by the Catholic Diocese, simply relying on process components of planning and not, in fact, what the outcome should be. Okay, so essentially, if we're going to get a more balanced outcome, we need to actually start listening to the people who live here and taking on board the detailed arguments that are provided. We're quite confident that the detailed submission, the information we provide, is more than enough to reject this proposal. I just want to deal with two other issues, jobs and the business of compromise. It goes without saying that rezoning itself doesn't create jobs. Having appropriate infrastructure in the right location and an absence of other constraints are the key ingredients, really. Now, recently the Regional Plan to 2036 was released, and it places a particularly big emphasis on strategic centres. And in our case, the closest strategic centres are obviously Curry, Cessnock and Maitland. So Black Hill is not close to any strategic centres. There is very little in the regional plan that has anything to do with Black Hill. It's not a priority for housing or anything else. Black Hill is basically an area without much infrastructure. It's heavily constrained in that it's wedged in between the Sugarloaf Range and the wetlands. And really it sits squarely in the Wadigans to Stockton corridor. So there's not a lot to recommend Black Hill as far as major development of any kind is concerned. On the other hand, a site like the hydro site in Curry is close to a major centre, close to the Hunter Expressway, is in a belt where there's going to be lots of population growth towards the Maitland area, and would be much more ideally located. And clearly, every job in the Black Hill area that potentially compromised one in Curry would be a bad thing, because it would add kilometres every day to the round trip to those major centres relative to a more strategically placed jobs in the Curry area. And finally, on the topic of compromise is quite a funny issue. For the last 4 or 5 years or so, there's been not the least bit of a sign of compromise from the Catholic Diocese. They've pushed ahead. They've kept pushing it back up to the largest amount of industrial land every time there was an opportunity. Now, our little group went and had discussions with the Department of Planning, and they basically laid the cards out on the table and said the longer these things go on, the more likely it is that there's going to be some development, and that some form of compromise will be inevitably called for. Now, we still honestly believe that it isn't necessary to develop more industrial land in Black Hill. We've already given enough. But if council is concerned about its planning powers and the possibility of losing them and thinks that a compromise is the best way to go, then we have what we think is a better compromise than any of the ones that have been previously put up, which in essence is to constrain the site, to divide it up so that the bottom section comprises 3 RU2 lots directly alongside Black Hill Road, which protects the Black Hill community, and that the northern side of the property is a 180 hectare lot, which has the big plus of being equivalent in size to the coal and allied block, being less likely to compromise developments elsewhere because they'll be on a slightly smaller scale. And if you stick exactly with the currently exhibited plan, there would be 40 hectares of E2 in that area, and consequently there'd be 140 hectares available for light industrial. So it's our view that if council needs to compromise, they're better off finding a compromise that fits better with the current Hunter Regional Plan, which actually has growth marked in the area, but not in parts of Black Hill, but not going anywhere near Black Hill Road, and which doesn't specify that it needs to be employment related, but I mean, obviously because the lack of infrastructure is not likely to be other sorts of things. So we're actually suggesting that if there is a compromise, it ought to be one that both protects the area along Black Hill Road and helps keep it as rural. And the idea of restraining those to 3 RU2 40 hectare sites is it meets exactly the current requirements in terms of the minimum lot size for RU2. So we're suggesting that the particular alternative compromise that we're putting up would actually represent a good fit, and in all likelihood wouldn't need to go back out on exhibition because all the key ingredients would have already been viewed by the community. So please do your best to try and support the community, and don't go along with a planning process just for the sake of it. Thank you.